If you want to be able to learn absolutely anything in as short a time as possible, then you need to actually learn how to learn. Learning how to learn is probably one of the most important skills you could ever learn because it helps you with literally everything. Preparing for exams, learning new languages, learning any new skill, learning how to play an instrument, whatever you want to do in life, you need to know how to learn so that way you can learn things in as short a time as humanly possible. I see a ton of people working extremely hard, but they don't get the results that they really deserve because they are not learning efficiently. It's a common misconception that smart people are people that can learn things quickly because they're smart, they're just biologically better than us. But that's not the case. Instead, they're a lot more efficient with their time. And if we can get that efficient, we can also appear to learn things extremely quickly and be therefore smart. Okay, that's great, but how exactly do you do that? Well, let me tell you exactly what works with me and what works in the literature. So the first thing you need to do is you need to actually do something. So a lot of the time people will just flick on a YouTube video, they'll just read a book or they'll do something like this. But let me ask you, if I got you to read a book on playing the piano, would you be able to play the piano even if you read for 10 hours, 50 hours? Probably not. You need to actually do something. Learning is an active process in your brain. You need to actually physically do something with the information that you have in order to get it to stick into your long-term memory. So for example, if you're just reading something, that's not good enough. What you need to do instead is after you read a certain passage, you need to then think about it in your own words. You need to re-explain it. Ideally, you would explain it to someone else. That's the best way to do it. But if not, imagine that you had to teach this to someone else. Imagine you had to explain it to your parents, or maybe to someone in a lower year group, or to someone else that's interested. How would you explain it? Ideally, you want to reword everything into its simplest form, into a way that works for you. Even better if you can make an analogy, so a kind of comparative situation that you can refer to as well. Once you know you can do that, it will build up those connections in your brain and you'll also know that you've understood it, rather than being able to just regurgitate what it says in a textbook or on a video. Some other ways that this can help, for example, if you're preparing for an exam, best way to do it is to do past paper questions. If you're learning another language, you need to actually use the language, write sentences in that language, try and speak about your day in that language. In short, do something with the information you're trying to learn. If you're learning to play the piano, again, reading a bunch of sheet music, not really going to help you. You need to actually, play the piano. The key idea here is to get your brain working. It is a proven scientific fact that we only really remember 20% of what we read or listen to. So you need to actively do something with the information in order to get your brain to do it. Learning is an active process in your brain. Your brain is literally rewiring itself. So your brain doesn't want to do it, but it will do it if it thinks that the information is worthwhile. After about 45 minutes of actual active studying, you should feel the fatigue in your brain, just like when you go to the gym. Okay, when you go to the gym and you exercise, you feel tired. You should feel tired after revising for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then you can take a 15-minute break, jump straight back into it. But again, this goes for any kind of learning. You should feel tired or exhausted after a relatively short period of time. There are people that say to me, I've studied for 5 hours in a row because all they've done is read a book for 5 hours. The reason why you're able to do that is because you're not really tired. Again, imagine if someone said they went to the gym for 5 hours. You'd think, there is no way that you've done a proper workout. However, if someone's gone for an hour and they're dead, you would assume that they've done a lot more, and that is the case. Remember that human beings are quite lazy in general. This isn't an attack on you, it's your brain. Your body does not want to do stuff that requires energy if it doesn't have to. So again, you might be tempted to just read a book or watch a YouTube video or something like that, but you need to do something with that information to be able to do it. Point number 2 is repetition. Going back to the first point about the brain being lazy, it doesn't really want to remember information that won't be useful to it. And 9 times out of 10, if you just revise something once, your brain will go, oh, that's cool, I can do it today. Well, I probably won't need it tomorrow. So it checks with you. It says, okay, tomorrow, have we used it? No? Then I'm not going to bother making it into our long-term memory. And after a week, you would have forgotten all of it. How many times have you gone into a test, you've crammed really, really hard for it, you've done decently well on the test, but then a week later, 2 weeks later, can you remember anything? Probably not. We've all been there, and that's because we haven't done repetition. Your brain, again, think of it in terms of your brain being a very smart creature, right? It will learn things that it repeatedly uses. That's why when you guys get a job, or you go and you do something every single day, you remember it forever. You remember your name, you may remember your passwords for various websites or whatever. That's because you repeatedly use them. But you don't remember maybe the quadratic formula because you don't use it all the time. So again, it's all about repetition. So here's how it works. on screen now you're going to see a picture of the forgetting curve. Essentially, after you learn something once, it will decay exponentially the amount that you actually retain. However, if after one day you repeat it, then it boosts itself back up. And as you repeat it more and more frequently, if you notice, the drop-off is getting less and less each time. This is because your brain's getting convinced. It's like, okay, fine, we've used it 3 times in a row. Here's the ideal spacing. You do something once, the next day you recap it. Now this doesn't mean that if you spend an hour today, you have to do an hour tomorrow. It can be as simple as remembering in your brain, doing some active recall on what you did. It could be answering a single question. So I'm going to use maths as an example because I'm a mathematician. Let's say we learn, I don't know, trigonometry here. The next day, all I need to do is do one trig question, which takes me 5-10 minutes, and I've recapped it. Then you wait another 2 days. So that's 3 days after you initially learnt it. You do again. You do maybe a trig question. And what you'll find is, after about a week of doing this, so you've done day 1, do it the day after, 2 more days, and then another 3 days, you'll actually retain it in your long-term memory. Now teachers do normally try and do this in their lessons with their starters. They try and give questions from before to try and help, but again, you can't rely on that. But I hear you say, okay, let's say you're trying to learn multiple things at once. Again, most of you guys watching are GCSE or A-level students. Well, how are you meant to revise 10 subjects? It's quite simple. Let's say you're doing maths today. Tomorrow, you do a trig question, and then you'll revise your history afterwards. So in your hour of studying, you may have 10 minutes or 20 minutes of what you did the day before in a different subject. That's completely fine. And that's also why when I give people revision timetables, I don't necessarily want them just doing, maths this day, English the next day, science the next day, because it's not really realistic and it's not helping you study. It's not helping you remember. Also, when you do those exams, you're going to be doing multiple exams on the same day. So you may have maths in the morning and geography in the afternoon. So it's not good if you only can do one subject per day, because that's not what's going to happen. And again, in the real world, if you're an adult or if you're at university or whatever, you're going to have multiple subjects or multiple things you need to learn. The next reason why repetition is so important is that knowing something actually takes 2 parts. There's 2 components to it. One part is the knowing. So it's somewhere in your long-term memory. It's buried deep. The second part is recall. So actually being able to drag that information out from your long-term memory so you can think of it. So have you ever had that thing where you kind of sat there like, I know this, and then 5-10 minutes later you're like, that's it, got it. Again, in real life, if you're learning a language, you're learning how to play an instrument, or you're studying for an exam, you can't afford to sit there for 5-10 minutes waiting for the answer to come to you. Instead, what you have to do is recall that information very, very quickly. So how do you do that? Well, all you need to do is practice the recall aspect. So this is why flashcards with timings are actually pretty good. Because it's like, random definition, okay, that's what this is, boom, there you go. You've practiced it. That's also why when people try and learn a language, this is again maybe slightly off topic, they practice reading and writing a hell of a lot, but then they can't speak because they're not practicing recalling the information. If you think about it, when someone speaks to you, you can respond instantly. That's when you truly know something, when you can respond straight away. So keep that in mind. If you happen to be doing A-level maths, I actually have a revision planner that will lay it all out for you. You write the date on which you did the topic, and it will automatically schedule in all the repetitions. It's completely free. I'll link it in the description, and I'll link the video associated with explaining it, because it might be a little tricky to use, but there's going to be a video and a link in the description in case you're doing A-level maths, AS or year 13, and you'll be able to use that in order to just automate this process for you, make it a bit easier for you. Third thing, it's a term used in educational literature quite a lot called interleaving. So what is interleaving? Interleaving is all about linking together different topics. Now, just so you know how your memory actually works, is you have this kind of core concept, this idea 1. When you learn something new, what your brain tries to do is link it to pre-learnt stuff. So for example, if you already know idea 1, then it tries to link idea 2 to idea 1. Now, of course, this can get hellishly complicated because everything is linked to something else. Let's say if you're learning about multiplication, you may think of all of the different places, and this is what your brain does, where you might have multiplying. Maybe in a game that you've played, a sport that you've watched, pretty much anything. Or when you've had to maybe bake something or cook something or use multiplication ever, it will link it all together. Now, this is actually a very good thing. These individual things are called schemas. Okay? And the building of schemas is what learning is. It's taking a small idea and it's building, adding more and more and more and more onto it, but also linking individual schemas to other things. So, what do I mean by doing this? Well, in order for something to be very strongly connected, we need to link it to as many things as possible. In this case, we have idea 1, idea 2. There's only one little kind of thing connecting it. It doesn't seem very stable. However, if I link this to a bunch of other ideas, you can see that it seems a lot more connected. How this works neurologically speaking is it means that more things can remind you of it. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're learning about thermodynamics in GCSE or A-level physics. Well, the teacher then tells you that thermodynamics, the word just means the study of temperature. In your head, your brain is going to try and say, okay, temperature, what do I know? What do I know? Oh, okay, it could be measured in degrees Celsius, degrees Fahrenheit, okay, cool. Well, I know that, 0 degrees Celsius is the freezing point of water, and 100 degrees Celsius is when water boils, and it tries to link things together. And the more that it can link current learning, so what you're actually learning now, to previous ideas, the quicker you will adopt new knowledge. This is actually why, the further you study, let's say, maths, the better at learning new maths you become. It gets faster and faster and faster. So when you first started maths back in primary school, counting was difficult for you. Like the idea of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was incredibly difficult for you. The idea of multiplying, incredibly difficult. But then as you jump and you go ahead to, let's say, year 7, 8 and 9, multiplying numbers is quite easy. So anything involved with multiplying numbers, you learn faster than learning the first thing in the first place, because there's more ideas that the new idea can link to. So what does this mean to you, right? Well, what it means is when you study something, you should be consciously and making explicit the different connections. So what does that mean? Again, when your teacher says thermodynamics is the study of temperature, you should think in your head or even out loud, probably not out loud in the classroom because you'll get a detention, but you should be consciously thinking, okay, what temperature, what does it mean? Okay, well when it's warm, this, and you're thinking about all of the different things that temperature can be linked to. And you should do this when you're studying as much as humanly possible. For example, if you're studying biology as well, I did that for A-level as well, if I saw something to do with the heart, I would link it to the other parts of the circulatory system. Or I would think about it in terms of the lungs as well, oxygenated and deoxygenated, and try and link things together. Now, I know Elon Musk is a pretty controversial person, but he actually designed some of the rockets that SpaceX uses. And someone asked him, how on earth do you learn all this stuff? Because you aren't a trained rocket scientist. And he said that whenever he reads something, whenever he tries to learn something, he breaks it down and links it to something else that he knows about. He always does that, and that is how he's managed to learn so many different things in his life. It is a well-known fact. So again, whenever you're learning something, try and link it to something else. The more interesting thing is, you can do this across subjects. So if you're doing biology and chemistry, for example, there's no reason why, when you're looking at the biology, you can't link it to something from chemistry. When you're learning maths, there's no reason why you can't link maths and physics. Or go beyond that, link it to completely different subjects. The more connections you make explicitly clear in your brain, the faster you'll remember something, which means you'll need to spend less time trying to memorize it. It will just work naturally. So that kind of brings us to the kind of summary, these 3 key steps that you can use in order to maximize your learning potential. If you do all of these, you'll find that you need to study far less, or you'll learn more in the time taken. Again, your study sessions should not be more than an hour before you have a break, because if you're doing this hardcore, you're actually using all of these, your brain's going to be tired after probably 45 minutes, I would say. So keep that in mind. Sitting there for 3 hours, if you're not tired and you think you can go longer, then you're definitely doing something wrong. Aim to do these 3 things. Again, do something with the information that you're learning. Actively do something. Try and explain it in your own words. Repetition. Make sure you hit the subject, the topic, multiple times. If you learn something on one day and you can do it, it doesn't mean you'll know how to do it next week. So repeat it. Interleaving. Link everything you're learning to other subjects and other concepts within or outside of your subject itself. Do these 3 things and you'll be able to learn anything. It will apply inside school, outside school, whatever you want to learn. Hope you enjoyed, hope you found it useful. I'll see you in the next one.